You know, sooner or later the truth comes out, and what I'm about to tell you is going to surprise even the most cynical of you. The immigration crisis at our southern border is more about Barack Obama than a humanitarian crisis. Now, when you first heard of the border crisis, I know you had visions, just as I had, of babies being carried by their siblings, hot, hungry, exhausted, looking for a safe haven, a better existence, and everything the American dream has to offer. And when you first heard of this crisis, I know that you thought, as did I, that it was an emergency and that there was no way to know ahead of time or even prepare for this. Well, I have news for you. Most are not babies whose parents are sending them to escape a violent country in need of a better life. Example: 43-year-old Pedro Alberto Monterroso Navas from Honduras who crossed illegally with children, voluntarily turned himself into Border Patrol. He admitted he was an alien, knowing that he'd be given a pass. He was processed and released, as are all illegals entering our southern border. He as part of an incomplete family unit from Central America. Today, Navas is under arrest for the murder of a 24-year-old woman in Louisiana. Now, the influx of a criminal element should be no surprise. Number one, it's statistically inevitable, especially given the number of males, the majority between the ages of 14 and 17, who freely admit their violent gang affiliations, most to MS-13, one of the world's most brutal gangs. The entry of criminals is also inevitable, since we really have no way to screen or know who has a criminal record. Remember President Jimmy Carter? Somewhat rehabilitated, since our current president now holds the #1 spot as the worst president in modern times. Well, in 1980, he allowed the Marielitos to enter our country, most of them coming by boat from Cuba, the majority of whom were released from Cuban prisons and mental health facilities. They came for a better life, with Castro's blessing. Castro, who wanted to get rid of them, was a little smarter than Carter, who wanted to give the Cubans a safe haven to the detriment of Americans. But like that Mariel influx, part of the current rush to process these illegals quickly and expeditiously is based upon the, quote, humanitarian crisis, the one that President Obama declared last month. But how would you feel if you heard that the human crisis involving poor children and babies from Central America, the same ones who are now being sent to your state, your town, and your village, was one that the Obama administration knew was coming for 2 years? Now, the deluge that caught us all by surprise, so urgent that it's taking Border Patrol agents from protecting the border to changing diapers and feeding babies, was not only apparent to the Obama administration ages ago, but was one that they tried to cover up. Now, over the past 2 years, multiple warning signs were conveyed to the Obama administration. Studies they funded confirming the coming surge, and Customs and Border Patrol, as well as ICE agents, were ringing alarm bells. Now, the White House was directly involved 2 years ago in efforts to care for these kids when they negotiated that temporary shelter at Lackland Air Force Base in Texas. So why, you say, would the Obama administration not prepare and plan and warn us 2 years ago? Why? Because, as I told you, I draw but one conclusion. Barack Obama is intentionally using the immigration crisis as an excuse to change the demographics and ultimately the electorate of this nation. Indeed, our president was more focused on his re-election and a legacy of immigration overhaul. It was a calculated decision by the White House to not alert us, to not protect our borders, and to not send a message to those Central American countries or call their presidents to stop the exodus, because Barack Obama had a narrative that the truth would have destroyed. Think about it. If the president were to tell us this surge was coming, indeed already started, it would be far more difficult to pass comprehensive immigration reform, wouldn't it? For sure, they didn't tell Capitol Hill, who found out only when the non-government organizations and churches started to request additional funding to take care of these kids. Now, the Office of Refugee Resettlement in 2011 had a budget of $149 million to shelter and care for foreign children. In 2013, after the surge, it was up to $376 million. This year, $495 million, and guess what? This year, the White House just bumped it up to $912 million. Mr. President, you are using this crisis for your own political purpose, to protect your legacy, to change the electorate, to favor your party, at a medical, emotional, and financial cost to the American people. Why don't you just admit that you understood 2 years ago that had this leaked out, your so-called comprehensive immigration reform didn't have a chance of becoming law? Lucky for us, the truth always comes out. And that's my